The amphitheater was massive, stretching upward in circular tiers that could hold thousands of beings. Every seat was filled with cadets from across the known galaxy. Some had scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. Others had skin that glowed faintly with bioluminescence. There were beings made of crystal, beings that floated in containment fields, and beings whose bodies shifted between solid and liquid states. The diversity was staggering, a testament to the Galactic Council's reach across 47 member species. Soon sat in the back row, his datapad resting on his knee. He wore the standard Academy uniform, a gray and blue suit that adapted to each species' unique physiology. His looked simple compared to others, just basic humanoid cut with no special life support attachments or environmental modifications. He watched quietly as more cadets filed in, their excited chatter filling the vast space with sounds ranging from musical chirps to deep rumbling vibrations. Next to him, a small insectoid being was struggling to climb into the seat. Her 6 legs clicked against the metal surface as she tried to find purchase. Soon reached out instinctively to help, but stopped himself. He had learned quickly that many species found human proximity uncomfortable. Something about the way humans moved, the predator's eyes that faced forward, the teeth designed for tearing meat. He pulled his hand back. The insectoid noticed and tilted her head, compound eyes reflecting his image hundreds of times. She made a soft clicking sound that his translator rendered as a polite thank you, then managed to settle into her seat. Her name tag read Una, and her species designation was Hive-born. The lights dimmed suddenly, and a deep vibration filled the room. All conversation stopped. At the center of the amphitheater, a raised platform began to glow. A figure materialized there, tall and imposing, made entirely of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns across the walls. This was Commandant Veltar, one of the Velthara, a species known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and longevity. The Commandant's voice resonated through the chamber, not through air, but through vibrations that every species could perceive regardless of their hearing organs. It was an impressive display of technology and natural ability combined. Welcome, the voice said. You have come from worlds beyond counting, from cultures ancient and new, from environments that would kill those not adapted to them. You are the best your species has to offer. You are here to learn, to grow, and to serve the Galactic Council as officers, diplomats, and protectors of peace. The speech continued with the expected platitudes about honor, duty, and unity. Soon had heard similar words at the smaller orientation on Earth before he left. He took notes anyway, his fingers moving quickly across the datapad surface. Other cadets were doing the same. Though some used tentacles, others used thought interfaces, and one seemed to be secreting some kind of chemical notation onto an organic tablet. But then the Commandant's tone changed. The crystal body stopped refracting pleasant colors and began to pulse with deep red warnings. There are places in this galaxy that are forbidden to us, the Commandant continued. Worlds so hostile that to land upon them means certain death for most sentient species. We classify these as Deathworlds, rated from Class 1 to Class 9 based on their lethality. These worlds spawn life, yes, but life that is twisted by constant danger, shaped by relentless predation, and hardened by environmental extremes that would shatter our finest ships. The amphitheater's holographic displays came alive, showing images of worlds that looked like nightmares. Planets with gravity so intense that bones would snap like twigs. Worlds where the atmosphere itself was corrosive acid. Moons where tidal forces created constant earthquakes that reshaped continents daily. Planets circling stars that bathed them in radiation that would cook cells within seconds. And from these worlds, the Commandant said, come beings we call Deathworlders. They are strong beyond measure, fast beyond tracking, and aggressive beyond reasoning. They know only survival. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be integrated into civilized society. The Council has standing protocols. No Deathworlder may serve in our military, attend our academies, or hold positions of authority where they might endanger others. A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. Fear was a universal emotion, it seemed, transcending species barriers. Dae-Sung saw Yuna's antennae flatten against her head, a clear sign of distress in her people. Across the aisle, a methane-breathing Qualori named Tae-1 was checking the seals on his environmental suit nervously, as if a Deathworlder might burst through the walls at any moment. The Commandant showed more images. Beings that looked like living weapons, all claws and fangs and armored hide. Creatures that could apparently survive in vacuum, or swim through molten rock, or hunt in packs with terrifying coordination. Each image was accompanied by incident reports. Warnings from Council survey teams who had observed these species from orbit and deemed them too dangerous for contact. You are safe here, the Commandant assured them. The Academy screens all applicants thoroughly. No Deathworlder has ever walked these halls, and none ever will. The protocols exist for your protection and for the stability of the Council itself. Dae-Sung kept his expression neutral, though his heart was beating faster. Earth's classification report had been deliberately vague during humanity's application to the Council. They had listed Earth as having diverse ecosystems and moderate challenges, which was technically true. They just hadn't mentioned that those moderate challenges included apex predators that could run for hours without tiring, weather systems that spawned storms visible from space, tectonic activity that could level cities, and diseases that had killed billions throughout human history. The Commandant finished the speech with reminders about schedule, safety protocols, and the honor of wearing the Academy uniform. The cadets were dismissed to find their quarters and prepare for training to begin the next day. As the crowd filed out, Dae-Sung noticed other cadets keeping their distance from him. Word had spread somehow that he was from a newly admitted species. Earth was unknown to most of them, and unknown meant potentially dangerous. He didn't blame them for being cautious. Yuna skittered past him, then stopped. She turned back, her translator processing her clicks and chirps into standard language. You are Earthborn, yes? I read your species just joined the Council. Dae-Sung nodded carefully. Yes, we are new. Yuna's antennae perked up with curiosity. What is Earth like? Is it beautiful? Dae-Sung thought about home. He thought about mountains that touched the sky, oceans that could swallow continents, forests filled with life that competed and cooperated in equal measure. He thought about humanity's long climb from caves to spacecraft, every step forward earned through blood and determination. It is beautiful, he said simply. And it made us who we are. Yuna seemed satisfied with that answer. She bid him farewell in her species custom, touching her antennae to his hand briefly, and then scurried off to join other hive-born cadets. Dae-Sung stood alone in the emptying amphitheater, looking at the stage where the Commandant had spoken. The warning about Deathworlders echoed in his mind. He wondered how long it would take before someone realized that a monster from a Class 9 Deathworld was sitting among them. Taking notes and trying his best to fit in, he picked up his datapad and headed for the dormitories. Tomorrow the real training would begin, and he would have to be very careful about just how much of his true capabilities he revealed. The training grounds were located in the outer ring of the station, where artificial gravity could be adjusted to simulate different planetary conditions. Dae-Sung stood with his assigned squad in what the instructors called the endurance track, a 5-kilometer course that wound through obstacles designed to test every cadet's physical limits without breaking them. The gravity had been set to 1.2 Earth standard, which the instructors announced was the maximum safe level for mixed species training. Around him, cadets were already showing signs of strain, and they hadn't even started moving yet. Yuna's legs were trembling slightly under her exoskeleton. Tae-1 had activated additional support systems in his methane suit. A fungoid cadet named Ji-Woo had extended root-like structures from his feet to better anchor himself against the increased weight. Instructor Sang-min floated above them in a reduced gravity field, his Quillori body's gas bladders keeping him aloft easily. His voice came through everyone's translators simultaneously. This course is designed to push you to exactly 70% of your species' documented limitations. Pain is expected. Injury is not. If you feel you are approaching failure, signal immediately and you will be extracted. There is no shame in knowing your limits. The starting horn sounded, a vibration that all species could detect. The cadets began to move. They soon started at what he considered an easy jog. Within 30 seconds, he realized he needed to slow down significantly. Other cadets were struggling badly. The hive-born moved in short bursts, their legs not designed for sustained running. The aquatic Sirani named Haewon was contained in a mobile water tank that her species used for land movement. But the added weight in this gravity was clearly overwhelming her propulsion system. He deliberately fell back to match their pace. The course wound through structures that simulated Viri. Terrains, rocky hills, soft sand, areas with reduced visibility. Each obstacle was another test. Dae-Sung found himself constantly holding back, making sure he appeared tired when he felt fine, adding heavy breathing that he didn't actually need. But even his acting couldn't hide everything. At the halfway point, Haewon's tank began to fail. Warning lights flashed across its surface. She was going to be stuck in the middle of the course, and the safety instructors were several minutes away. Her species couldn't survive in standard atmosphere for more than a few moments. Without thinking, Dae-Sung ran to her position. The tank was massive, easily 200 kilograms with the water and equipment. He got underneath it, found the load-bearing points, and lifted. His legs burned with the effort, but Earth's gravity was stronger than this. Earth's gravity had made human bones dense, human muscles efficient, human cardiovascular systems incredibly powerful. He carried the tank and Haewon inside it for the remaining 2.5 kilometers. When he crossed the finish line and carefully set the tank down, the other cadets stared at him in absolute silence. Instructor Sang-min descended from his observation position, his speaking tendrils quivering with what Dae-Sung had learned to recognize as confusion. Cadet Dae-Sung, explain how you just carried 200 kilograms for 2.5 kilometers in elevated gravity while maintaining a running pace. Dae-Sung straightened, trying to catch his breath even though his body had barely registered the effort as exercise. On Earth, we train in higher gravity naturally. This felt manageable. That was a lie. Earth's gravity was exactly 1 standard unit. But the lie was better than the truth, that his species had evolved to run down prey across vast distances, that human persistence hunting had made them capable of moving for hours, even days, when necessary. The instructor made a notation on his datapad, his expression unreadable. The next challenge came during combat training. The Academy used simulation pods that created holographic opponents matched each cadet's skill level. The AI would adapt in real time, providing appropriate challenge without actual danger. Dae-Sung stepped into his assigned pod. The scenario materialized around him, a simple one-on-one combat test against a holographic opponent roughly his size. He was supposed to use the basic defensive techniques taught in the morning session. The hologram attacked. Ji-Sung's body reacted before his conscious mind could engage. Millions of years of predator evolution, of hunting and being hunted, had given humans reflexes that bordered on precognitive. He didn't just see the attack. He saw the weight shift, the muscle tension, the preparatory movements that happened microseconds before the actual strike. He countered. The hologram went down hard. The AI adjusted, creating a stronger opponent. A soon adapted, his body moving with practiced efficiency. Humans had invented thousands of martial arts over their violent history, ways to turn their natural weapons into refined technique. He had studied several, more as cultural appreciation than practical skill. Now those lessons surfaced automatically. The third opponent appeared, then a fourth. The AI kept escalating, trying to find his actual limit. By the 10th opponent, they soon realized he needed to lose intentionally. He allowed a strike to land, went down, and signaled submission. The pod opened. Instructor Sang Min was waiting outside with several other instructors. Their expressions ranged from confusion to concern. That AI is calibrated for safety, one of them said. It should have found your limit by the third iteration. Instead, it escalated to combat scenarios designed for heavy gravity species. You should not have survived past iteration 5 without serious injury. I got lucky, Dae-Soon offered weakly. The instructors conferred among themselves in rapid exchanges that the translators couldn't quite keep up with. Finally, they dismissed him, but flagged his file for review. The final incident that day happened in the dining facility. The Academy provided nutritional options for all species, carefully prepared to meet each one's unique dietary requirements. Dae-Soon collected his tray, filled with what looked like standard protein, carbohydrates, and vegetables. He added hot sauce from Earth, one of the few personal items he had been allowed to bring. He sat at a table with several other cadets, including Yuna, Tae-Won, and Ji-Woo. They were discussing the day's training when Yuna noticed the bottle of hot sauce. What is that red liquid? She asked. Flavor enhancer, Dae-Soon said. It makes food more interesting. May I scan it? Her species had excellent chemical detection abilities, and her antennae extended toward the bottle. A moment later, she recoiled violently. That is capsaicin. That is a poison. That is a defensive compound plants use to prevent being eaten. Why are you putting poison on your food? The other cadets were staring now. Dae-Soon tried to explain. On Earth, many plants produce these compounds. Humans evolved to tolerate them. We actually enjoy the sensation. He took a bite to demonstrate. The heat was pleasant, familiar, comforting. Around the table, the other cadets looked horrified. It causes pain, Tae-Won said. I can see your face flushing. Your body temperature is rising. You are experiencing a defense reaction. It is a little spicy, Dae-Soon admitted. That is the point. It is supposed to be intense. Ji-Woo leaned forward, his fungoid body pulsing with curiosity. What else can your species consume that would be toxic to us? Dae-Soon thought about it. Alcohol, caffeine, theobromine, many alkaloids, some mushrooms that are deadly to most species, raw proteins that contain bacteria that we can process safely, fermented foods that are essentially controlled rot. The table went silent. Finally, Yuna spoke quietly. What kind of world makes beings who eat poison for pleasure? Dae-Soon didn't have a good answer for that. He finished his meal and uncomfortable. Silence while the other cadets whispered among themselves. That night, lying in his quarters, Dae-Soon accessed Earth's communication network. The time delay was significant, but he sent a message to his family anyway. Training is harder than expected, he wrote. Not physically, socially. I think they are starting to realize I am different. I think they are starting to be afraid. He stared at the message for a long time before encrypting it and sending it across the light years toward home. Outside his window, the stars looked the same as they did from Earth, beautiful, distant, indifferent to the struggles of one human trying to prove he belonged among them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. He would have to be more careful. He would have to hide better. Because if the Academy discovered the truth, that Earth was not a moderate world, but a Class 9 death world, everything humanity had worked for would be destroyed. The alarm cut through the station like a physical force. Not the gentle chime of a scheduled drill, but the harsh wailing that meant real danger. Daisung was in the library section when it started, studying stellar navigation with a small group of cadets. The holographic star charts flickered and died as emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Emergency containment breach in lower engineering, the station's AI announced calmly, despite the chaos. Class 3 atmospheric contamination detected. All personnel evacuate affected areas immediately. This is not a drill dot. The library exploded into motion. Cadets rushed toward the exits in a mass of panicked bodies, some flying, some running, some slithering, depending on their species. Daesung moved with them, his heart rate increasing, but his mind staying focused. Humans had evolved to think clearly during danger. Panic was a luxury that got you killed on Earth. They reached a staging area where emergency personnel were setting up triage stations. Instructor Sang-min was there, his gas bladders fully inflated. With stress, coordinating the evacuation with several other staff members. Cadets were being counted off as they arrived, names checked against registration lists. Daesung heard Sang-min's voice rise above the noise. "We are missing 3 cadets. Yuna, Taewon, and Hanwoo. They were in study room 7 in the lower section. The contamination has that entire area sealed off." One of the emergency coordinators brought up a holographic display. The contaminated zone glowed angry red, spreading slowly but steadily through the ventilation systems. Study room 7 was right in the center of it. "What is the contaminant?" someone asked. "Coolant leak from the tertiary reactor systems." The coordinator's voice was grim. "Hydrogen fluoride gas mixed with other compounds. It is corrosive to organic tissue. Lethal exposure time for most council species is approximately 8 minutes. The cadets have emergency shelters in the room, which will give them perhaps 10 to 12 minutes total. And the hazard response team? 20 minutes to suit up and deploy. We are calling them in now." The math was simple and terrible. The trapped cadets would be dead before help could reach them. Daesung pushed forward through the crowd. "What about partial protection? A basic respirator and eye protection?" The coordinator looked at him like he was insane. "The gas attacks mucous membranes, eyes, skin, respiratory tissue. A respirator would only delay death by a minute or 2. No one can survive in there without a full hazard suit." But the coordinator was thinking about council species. Species that had evolved on gentle worlds where the atmosphere was constant and predictable. Species whose skin was thin, whose respiratory systems were delicate, whose bodies had never needed to develop resistance to chemical threats. Humans were different. Earth's atmosphere had been a toxic soup once, full of oxygen that was literally poison to the first organisms. Life had adapted. And even now, Earth had places where the air could kill, where volcanic gases made entire regions uninhabitable, where industrial accidents created clouds of death. Humans had learned to survive in those places, at least briefly. "Where is the equipment storage?" Daesung asked. "Cadet, you cannot." Sang-min started. "Where is it?" Daesung repeated. His voice hard dots something in his tone made the instructor point. "Down that corridor. But you will be throwing your life away." Daesung ran. The equipment storage was basic emergency supplies, not full hazard gear. He grabbed a respirator designed for smoke inhalation, eye protection that was meant for debris, and gloves rated for chemical spills. It was barely better than nothing. He pulled it all on while running back toward the contaminated section. Security had sealed the doors. Daesung reached the override panel, but his authorization wasn't high enough. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Sang-min had followed. "This is against every protocol," the instructor said. But he placed his tendrils on the panel and authorized the override. "If you die in there, I will never forgive myself. If I die in there, Dae-sung said, "And they die too. That is worse." The door opened. A wall of foul-smelling gas billowed out. Dae-sung's eyes immediately began to water, even behind the protection. His skin felt like it was burning. His throat tried to close up reflexively. Every instinct screamed at him to run away. He ran forward instead. The corridor was a nightmare of red, emergency lighting and swirling toxic fog. His vision blurred. The respirator helped with breathing, but did nothing for the rest of his body. He felt the gas attacking his exposed skin, felt it seeping in through the inadequate seals of his makeshift protection. Pain blossomed across every exposed surface, but pain was just information. Earth had taught humans to push through pain. Marathon runners whose bodies were destroying themselves. Soldiers who fought on despite horrific injuries. Parents who lifted impossible weights to save their children. The human body could endure incredible damage and still function, at least for a while. He found study room 7. The door was locked from the inside, the emergency shelter activated. He pounded on it. "This is Dae-sung. I am getting you out." The door opened a crack. Yuna's compound eyes looked out at him, filled with terror. "You cannot be here. You will die not before I get you out." Hyan-Wu, the Velthararn, was the largest. His crystal body was resistant to the gas, but his respiratory system was struggling. Tae-1 was in his environmental suit, which provided some protection, but was not designed for this type of contamination. Yuna was in the worst shape, her exoskeleton already showing signs of corrosion. Dae-sung grabbed Yuna under one arm and Tae-1 under the other. To Hyan-Wu, he shouted, "Follow me. Stay close." The journey back was worse than the journey in. Now he was carrying weight, moving slower, exposing himself longer. The pain intensified to the point where his vision started to tunnel. His lungs burned despite the respirator. He could feel his skin starting to blister. But humans could run for days. Humans could push their bodies beyond what should be possible. Humans had a trait that evolution had refined over millions of years, the ability to refuse to quit, even when quitting was the logical choice. He made it to the safe zone and collapsed. Medical teams swarmed immediately. Yuna and Tae-1 were pulled away for treatment. Dae-sung felt hands on him, scanners being passed over his body, voices shouting in multiple languages that his fading consciousness couldn't translate. His skin was red and blistering. His eyes were bloodshot and swollen. His respiratory system was inflamed. But he was breathing. His heart was still beating. His body was already beginning the process of healing, sending resources to damaged tissue, activating immune responses, doing what human bodies had learned to do. Over countless generations of surviving impossible things, the medical team kept scanning him, their instruments showing readings that didn't make sense. His recovery rate was impossible. The damage should have been permanent. He should have been dead. Instructor Sang-min was there, his voice urgent. "What is he? What kind of being survives that?" One of the medical staff, a Veltharan like Hyan-Wu, spoke slowly. "I do not know, but I need to see his species classification report immediately." Dae-sung tried to speak, tried to tell them not to look, tried to maintain the secret. But his voice was gone, his throat too damaged. He could only watch as they accessed his file. The medical staff went very still. Then one of them spoke in a whisper that carried through the sudden silence. "Earth is classified as a Class 9 death world. This cadet is a Deathworlder dot." The news spread through the crowd like the gas had spread through the lower decks. Fast, unstoppable, changing everything it touched. Cadets who had been cheering for his heroism suddenly backed away. Instructor Sang-min's gas bladders deflated with shock. Dae-sung felt consciousness sipping away, but his last thought was clear and bitter. The secret was out. Everything was about to change, and he couldn't do anything to stop it. The Galactic Council Chamber was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy. It existed simultaneously as a physical location and as a network of holographic projections, allowing representatives from all 47 member species to gather, regardless of their environmental needs or physical limitations. Some attended in person, others as holograms, and a few existed as pure energy constructs that interfaced directly with the chamber systems. Today, the chamber was full. Every seat occupied, every species represented. This was an emergency session, called with less than 12 hours' notice. The news from the Academy had reached the Council faster than anyone had anticipated, carried by concerned parents, worried instructors, and sensational media outlets that smelled a story too good to ignore. A Deathworlder in the Academy. A Class 9 Deathworlder, walking among their children, training to become an officer, hiding in plain sight. Counselor Baora sat in the human delegation section, her hands folded calmly in her lap, despite the storm she could feel building around her. She had known this moment would come eventually. Humanity's true nature couldn't stay hidden forever. She had hoped for more time, for humans to prove themselves gradually, to build relationships and trust before the revelation came. But crisis had forced the issue, and now she would have to defend her entire species in front of the galaxy's most powerful assembly. The chamber's speaker, an ancient Veltharan, whose crystal body showed veins of precious metals accumulated over centuries, called the session to order. The vibrations that served as its voice resonated through every being present. We are here to address a violation of fundamental council protocols. A Deathworlder has been admitted to our premier military academy. Worse, this was done through deliberate deception, by misrepresenting Earth's true classification. We must decide humanity's fate within our council. The floodgates opened. Representatives began speaking, sometimes shouting, in a cacophony of languages and communication methods. The translators struggled to keep up. A representative from the Hive world stood, her exoskeleton gleaming. My daughter was in that contaminated zone. She tells me the human saved her life. But she also tells me he moved through poison that should have killed him instantly, carried weights that should have crushed him, and survived exposure that would have dissolved her body. How can we trust beings with such power around our children? Another voice from one of the aquatic species. The protocols exist for good reason. Deathworlders cannot integrate into civilized society. They are violent, unpredictable, dangerous. We have observed other Class 9 worlds. The beings there are monsters, driven by aggression and survival instinct above all else. A crystalline being from a low-gravity world, pulsed with angry light. My people have been council members for 2,000 years. We followed every rule, proved ourselves over generations. The humans join and immediately break the most sacred protocols we have. They mock us with their deception. Biora waited. She let them speak, let them vent their fear and anger. She had been a diplomat long enough to know that sometimes people needed to hear themselves before they could hear others. But eventually, the speaker called for order and recognized her right to respond. She stood, her simple human form looking fragile among the exotic beings surrounding her. But her voice was steady when she spoke. My people did not deceive the council out of malice. We submitted our classification reports as we understood them. Yes, we knew Earth was challenging. We knew it had shaped us in specific ways. But we measured ourselves against our own standards, not yours. We did not realize the gap between our normal and your extreme was so vast. Lies. Someone shouted. You knew what you were doing. Biora pulled up a holographic display. This is Earth. Let me show you what we considered normal. The images began to play. Earth's sun, a yellow star that bombarded its planets with radiation. Earth's moon, massive and close, creating tidal forces that destabilized the crust. Earth's atmosphere, rich in corrosive oxygen. Earth's weather, storms that spanned continents with wind speeds that could tear apart structures. Earth's geology, tectonic plates that ground against each other, volcanoes that could alter global climate, earthquakes that could level city. Stock and the life, predators with jaws that could crush bone, prey animals that could run at speeds that blurred vision, microorganisms that caused plagues, plants that produced poisons, insects that could strip flesh from bone. Every ecological niche filled with something that could kill. This is home, B.O. said quietly. This is where we evolved. Every single day was a fight for survival, for millions of years. Can you imagine what that does to a species? The chamber was silent now. Watching the images with something like horror. It made us strong, yes. We can endure high gravity, toxic environments, extreme temperatures. We can run for hours, fight when injured, survive on minimal resources. These are not gifts. These are scars. Every human ability you fear came at a cost paid in blood and death, over evolutionary timescales you can barely comprehend. She changed the display. Now it showed human history. Ancient humans hunting across vast plains. Humans building civilizations despite earthquakes and floods and diseases. Humans reaching for the stars, despite living on a world that tried to kill them constantly. But surviving made us something else too. It made us adaptable, creative, determined. It taught us that when something tries to kill you, you find a way to live anyway. It taught us that when a member of your group is in danger, you help them, because tomorrow you might be the one who needs help. It taught us empathy, because we all understood suffering. A voice interrupted her. Pretty words. But we saw what your Deathworlder did. He is dangerous. He saved 3 cadets. Aora shot back. He ran into an environment that was killing him to rescue beings he barely knew. Is that the action of a monster? Or is that the action of someone who understands what it means to protect others? She pulled up more data. Human history. Wars, yes. Violence, yes. But also medicine, art, philosophy, cooperation. Humans had conquered their own world, not through individual strength, but through collective effort. They had turned their hostile environment into a home through determination and mutual support. You call us Deathworlders like it is a curse, Viora said. Like we are tainted by our origin. But I ask you this. When crisis came to your academy, who ran toward the danger? When your children were dying, who refused to let them die? You fear our strength, but perhaps you should consider why we developed it in the first place. The chamber was quiet. Biora pressed forward. Cadet Daesung broke no laws. He followed every rule. He trained hard. He helped his fellow cadets. And when the moment came, he proved that Deathworlders are not the monsters you fear. We are survivors. And sometimes, survivors make the best protectors. She sat down. The silence stretched. Finally, the speaker began the voting process. A simple majority would determine humanity's fate. Continue as provisional members with restrictions. Full expulsion from the council. Immediate acceptance with no restrictions. The options were presented. The vote took hours. Representatives conferred with their home governments across light years. Factions formed, argued, dissolved, reformed. The chamber became a living thing, shifting and changing as minds were made up and changed again. Biora watched and waited. She had said everything she could say. Now it was up to the galaxy to decide if humans belonged among the stars, or if they would be cast back to their death world. Alone and isolated. When the final count came in, it was close. Closer than it should have been. But the result was clear. Humanity would remain in the council. provisional status upheld, but with new conditions. All human cadets would undergo additional psychological evaluation. All human personnel would be monitored. And Earth's true classification would be made. Public knowledge across the galaxy, Biora let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. It wasn't a victory. It was barely a draw. But it was enough. Humanity would have its chance to prove that. Deathworlders could be trusted. As the session ended and representatives began to disperse, one of the Hive-born approached her. The same representative whose daughter Yuna had been saved. My daughter wants to thank the human personally, she said quietly. She says he is the bravest being she has ever met. She says if that is what a Deathworlder is, then perhaps we have been wrong about them. Biora smiled for the first time in hours. Tell her thank you. And tell her that humans look forward to proving that bravery comes in all forms, from all worlds. The representative nodded and left. Biora stood alone in the emptying chamber, looking at the stars visible through the transparent sections of the walls. Somewhere out there, Baesoon was recovering from his injuries. Somewhere out there, humanity was watching and waiting to see what would happen next. The real work was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the incident in the lower engineering decks. 3 months since the galaxy learned that a Deathworlder walked among them. 3 months since everything changed. Baesoon returned to the academy expecting silence. He expected isolation, fear, perhaps even violence. Instead, he found something he never anticipated: curiosity. The medical bay had kept him for 2 weeks, while his body finished healing. The doctors had studied him like he was a fascinating puzzle, documenting his recovery rate with a mixture of scientific interest and barely concealed amazement. Burns that should have taken months to heal disappeared in days. Tissue damage that should have been permanent simply regenerated. His body worked in ways that the medical staff found almost impossible to believe. When he was finally cleared to return to classes, he walked into the dormitory common area and stopped. Sitting at one of the large tables was Yuna, Tae-won, Gi-woo, and several other cadets he recognized from various training sessions. They had datapads spread across the surface, and they were clearly in the middle of an intense discussion. Yuna noticed him first. Her antennae perked up, and she waved a foreleg in greeting. Baesoon, come here. We need your help with something. He approached cautiously, still not sure what to expect. The other cadets made room for him at the table. No fear in their body language. No tension. Just the normal bustle of students working on a difficult problem. What is this? He asked. Study group, Tae-won said through his translator. We formed it last week. Advanced tactical scenarios. The final exam requires us to solve a rescue operation under hostile conditions, and none of us can figure out the optimal approach. You want my help? Baesoon couldn't keep the surprise out of his voice. You survived in an environment that should have killed you in seconds. Ji-woo pointed out, his fungoid body pulsing with what Baesoon had learned to recognize as enthusiasm. You carried 2 cadets through that environment, while barely able to see or breathe. You accomplished something the rest of us would not have even attempted. Obviously, we want your tactical insight. Yuna pulled up the scenario. A crashed ship on a high-gravity world with a corrosive atmosphere. Crew members trapped inside with failing life support. The question was how to mount a rescue with limited equipment and time. The standard answer is to prioritize and accept losses, she explained. Rescue who you can, leave the rest. Maximum efficiency, minimal risk. But something about that feels wrong to me now. Because it is wrong, Baesoon said quietly. He studied the scenario, his mind already working through possibilities. On Earth, we have a saying, no one gets left behind. It is not always practical. It is not always logical. But it is the goal. You start with the assumption that everyone can be saved, And then you work backward from there. But the math does not work, Taewon objected. Look at the environmental conditions. Look at the time constraints. You cannot save everyone. Not with your assumptions. Dae-sung agreed. But what if you change the assumptions? What if you use the crashed ship's remaining power to create a temporary safe corridor? What if you deploy equipment in waves rather than all at once? What if you accept higher risk to the rescue team in order to increase survivor capacity? The other cadets began working the numbers, their expressions shifting from skepticism to surprise as they realized the approach actually worked. The scenario could be solved with 0 acceptable losses if you are willing to push the boundaries of safety protocols. The instructors will say, "This is too risky." Ji-woo said, "They will mark it down for putting the rescue team in unnecessary danger." Maybe, Dae-sung acknowledged. But on Earth, we believe some risks are worth taking. Not reckless risks. Calculated ones. If the choice is between definitely losing people, or maybe losing people while trying to save them, we choose maybe. Over the following weeks, the study group became a regular fixture. More cadets joined, drawn by curiosity about the human perspective. Dae-sung found himself explaining concepts that seemed obvious to him, but were revolutionary to others. Ideas about endurance, about pushing past pain, about refusing to accept defeat until every option was exhausted. And he learned from them too. Yuna taught him about collective thinking, the way her hive-born species could share information and make decisions as a group mind. Taewon demonstrated the patience of a species that lived for centuries and thought in timescales that made human urgency seem almost comical. Ji-woo showed him how to find connections between disparate systems, a skill that came naturally to a networked organism. The Academy's curriculum began to shift. Instructors started incorporating human strategies into their lessons, not as curiosities, but as valid tactical approaches. They studied Earth's history of warfare, of survival, of exploration. They learned about humans who had walked across continents, climbed impossible mountains, survived in environments that should have been instantly lethal. But they also learned about human cooperation, about cities built by millions working together, about scientific breakthroughs achieved through collaboration across generations, about art and music and literature that celebrated not strength but compassion, not violence but understanding. The turning point came during the final simulation of the term. It was the Academy's most challenging test, a scenario designed to have no perfect solution. The cadets were placed in command of a fleet facing overwhelming odds. The enemy was stronger, faster, better equipped. Standard doctrine said to retreat, preserve forces, accept the strategic loss. Dae-sung's squad refused. They used tactics that the instructors had never seen before. They accepted risks that violated every safety protocol. They pushed their simulated ships and crew beyond documented limits. And when the scenario required sacrificing vessels to save others, they found alternatives. They rammed enemy ships with damaged vessels on automated pilots. They used debris fields as weapons. They exploited split-second timing windows that most species would never even attempt. The simulation ended. The instructors reviewed the results in stunned silence. Against all odds, against all probability, the squad had won. Not just survived, but won. Every friendly unit preserved. Every objective achieved. 0 acceptable losses, because they had refused to accept that losses were inevitable. Instructor Sang-min approached Dae-sung after the debriefing. His gas bladders were fully inflated, which Dae-sung had learned meant either stress or deep emotion. "I need to apologize," the instructor said. "When I learned you were a Deathworlder, I was afraid. I thought you were dangerous. I thought you would hurt someone eventually. But I was wrong. You are not dangerous. You are just determined. And there is a difference. Everyone is dangerous under the right circumstances, they soon replied. Humans just got more practice at survival than most. It does not make us better, just different. A ceremony was scheduled for the end of term. Day soon was called forward to receive a commendation for heroism. As he stood in front of the assembled academy, with cadets and instructors from dozens of species watching, he felt the weight of what this moment represented. He was not just Daesu anymore. He was a symbol. Proof that Deathworlders were not monsters. Proof that strength and compassion could coexist. Proof that the galaxy was big enough for all kinds of beings, even those from worlds that tried to kill them. Counselor Bu-O-Ra attended the ceremony via hologram, broadcasting from the council chambers. She spoke briefly. Her words carried across the Academy's communication systems. Today, we honor a cadet who showed us what humanity truly means. Not the violence we feared, not the aggression we expected, but courage, selflessness, and an absolute refusal to give up on others. This is what Deathworlds create. Not monsters. Heroes. After the ceremony, as cadets dispersed to celebrate the end of term, Dae-Sung found himself on one of the observation decks. The vast viewing port showed the stars beyond the station, countless points of light representing countless worlds. Yuna joined him, her small form barely reaching his shoulder. She looked out at the same view. My people have a saying, she said. The hive survives through unity. I think I understand now why humans survived. You made unity with your whole world. Even when it tried to kill you, you refused to hate it. You learned to love a world that showed you no mercy. Dae-Sung thought about that. About Earth's beauty and terror. About the way humans had learned to see home, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. The harshest teacher imaginable, but a teacher nonetheless. Is Earth still taking applications for cadets? Yuna asked suddenly. He looked down at her, surprised. Why? Because I want to meet more of your people. I want to understand how you think. And I want to learn how to be brave like you. We are not brave, Dae-Sung said gently. We are just too stubborn to quit. Maybe that is the same thing. They stood together, watching the stars. Below them, the Academy continued its work. Training cadets. Building understanding. Forging connections between species that had once seemed impossibly different. And somewhere in the depths of space, a fleet of ships was approaching the station. Inside were more human cadets, approved by the Council, ready to prove that Deathworlders had a place among the stars. Ready to show the galaxy that strength without compassion was useless, but compassion backed by strength could change everything. Dae-Sung smiled. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time since leaving Earth, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Not despite being human, but because of it. The galaxy was vast. The challenges were immense. But humans had evolved on a world that prepared them for impossible things. And now, finally, the galaxy was ready to see what impossible things they could achieve together.